This is Morgan and Sitlali coming at you from Totally Awesome Science. Today our topics will be pollination, fertilization, fruiting, and alternation of generations. Before we dive into more complex matters, we're going to talk a bit about flower anatomy. So here, Sitlali and I are drawing you out a flower diagram with the anatomy in there so we can discuss it, making a very beautiful orange flower. So right now we're making room for the filaments, which are those green things that we're about to draw in. And on top of the filaments, you're going to see these yellow dots, which in our case are the anther, and the anther contains pollen. Next, we are labeling the sepal, which are little leaves, and then the ovule, which is in the ovary. And of course we have a petal. And then that little stick thing heading up to the red thing is the style. And then on top, you can't see it, is the stigma, and it's the sticky stigma where the pollen will land to fertilize the flower. The things in blue make up the stamen, and the things in red make up the female part of the plant, which is the pistil, which is the stigma, style, ovary, and ovules. Let's play a game of fact, true, or false. The statement is, all flowers have both female and male parts. Give you some time to think. The answer is false. Now you may have been a little misled because the diagram we showed you had both, just so we could teach you guys in one shot. Plants with just either a male reproductive system or a female one are monoecious. If they have both, they are called dioecious. Pollination. Pollen can be transported by using many different means. One of the first is using animals, such as bees. You can use other insects. You could use bats. Some use birds, like hummingbirds, to pollinate, and this is done by usually the flower enticing the animal to come to it and get covered in pollen, basically. So that pollen would be transferred to a stigma of another flower. Another way to pollinate is by using the wind to blow the pollen around to hopefully catch a stigma. So what you're looking at right now is the female part of a flower, which is the pistil, not the style. I'm going to write style, and I made a mistake. Don't hate me. And at the top, you've got the sticky stigma, where the pollen sticks down. There's my head. Hello, Morgan. Here is the style, which is the long tube, and then we have the ovary and the ovule. So what happens, basically, is when the pollen sticks down on the stigma, it grows this long tube down through the style until it gets to the ovule. And then from there, two sperm make their journey down that tube into the ovule. So what we are looking at right here is the inside of the ovule, and those little stick things are sperm, and one of the sperm goes along and fertilizes the egg inside the ovule. Then the second sperm fertilizes the two polar nuclei, which, hello head, basically become the food source for the egg, and it's called endosperm. Also, guys, I apologize for some of the words being cut off, but I said them, so hopefully you learned them. So here it is spring. There's the grass on the ground, the sun's shining, it's nice and warm, there's flowers out, and then there's Morgan. She's very sad, doesn't feel well. Why, you may ask? I have a pollen allergy. So while pollen makes me feel sad, it's an important thing for plants to do, and I must remember that, even when I feel like my head's gonna explode. So here, if you're like me, you can see that a flower, such as an orange blossom, can turn it into an orange. And if you suffer from pollen allergies, just hang in there, because we need that food, and oranges are delicious, so sometimes it's worth it. Yes, we do know that oranges grow on trees, but we just wanted to get our point across. So our diagram's not the most accurate thing, but you got the point. Vocabulary. So your vocabulary word for today, if you want to impress somebody, is angiosperm, or angiosperm, try to sound fancy, which basically is any flowering plant. So, instead of just saying flowers, orange trees, flower, you can say orange trees are angiosperm. Sound fancy. Alternation of generations. So here is where it gets real complicated. So here's a diagram. I apologize for the blurriness. I couldn't get it any clearer no matter how much I tried. So basically this shows the generations of a plant. So up top you can see a mature flower, and you see relatively two pathways going from the flower. You see the one with the anther, and you see the one inside the ovule. So the path of the anther is for the male portion. So anther, you've got pollen grains, and then the pollen fertilizes a egg. We already talked about that. And then from there, once fertilized, it's called a zygote. And then that will turn into some sort of seed. And then that seed gets dispersed, and it turns into a plant. And along that process, you can kind of see in the circles something called meiosis, which we'll come back to so you can understand what it is a little bit better. And then you see the path of the females, which is basically their path to reproduction through making eggs and polar nuclei and such that you saw in the inside the ovule portion. Now we're rounding back to the idea of meiosis, which its process and how it does it is a very, very high level. So here we start with a cell, and after many steps, it replicates. But you can see its copies are a little different. They have half as much DNA as the first one did. And this is how sex cells replicate. So that's why they're both associated with either the male or the female side. Mostly, for the rest of the time, plants use the process of mitosis to replicate cells, which you start with one cell, and then after a long, long, long complicated process, your copies have the exact same amount of DNA as you started out with.